This is Wendy Halley, and you're listening to Lucid Cafe. Welcome to Season 6 of Lucid Cafe, a podcast exploring healing, consciousness, and the complexities of being human. Well, it's been a time. Strangest year I've experienced in quite a while. If you're a regular listener, you likely know that a devastating flood wiped out downtown Montpelier, Vermont, including my wellness center. And that was like 4 months ago now. The recovery process has had and continues to have some incredible highs and some frustrating lows. The ongoing success of the GoFundMe campaign has been humbling. I didn't realize it at the time the campaign was created, mostly because I was walking around in circles for about a month, that I wouldn't be able to reopen without your donations. So thank you so much for helping to make the campaign a success. If you'd like to see how far we've come or to make a donation, because I could certainly still use them, I've included a link in the show notes. I also want to thank my amazing friends Claire Wheeler, Melanie Meyer, and Terry O'Connor for helping to make the campaign a success. I feel very fortunate to have them in my life. So one of the challenges I've faced since the flood is finding a new affordable space for the center. I'm hopeful that the perfect space will find its way to me soon so I can get back to doing what I love and move forward with purchasing a new tricked out sound and light healing chamber, which I'm crazy excited to tell you about. So stay tuned. All right, first episode of Season 6. My guest, Jim Gale, is a mighty enthusiastic fellow, as you'll soon find out. He's an international permaculture advocate, entrepreneur, and visionary who has dedicated his life to transforming the way we interact with our environment, cultivating a sustainable future for all. Fueled by faith and courage, Jim has honed his ability to manifest success through the practice of inspired visioning and meditation. At the young age of 29, he set an audacious goal to retire in 3 years and surpassed expectations by creating a billion-dollar mortgage company. Jim's deep love for nature has taken him on a remarkable journey through 37 countries where he has embraced diverse cultures and sought wisdom from indigenous communities. And it was on this journey that he discovered permaculture, which shaped his understanding of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. With a vision to bring permaculture to every household on the planet, and he's serious about this, Jim founded Food Forest Abundance. This groundbreaking enterprise empowers individuals to create their own self-sustaining ecosystems, harnessing the abundant power of nature. So please enjoy my conversation with Jim Gale. Jim, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking with me.
It's a pleasure to be here, Wendy. I love these conversations, and I'm very excited to share this message with you and everybody listening, everybody watching. The message is so simple. When we take the poisons out of our lives, and specifically speaking, when we take the poisons out of our landscapes and we go grow perennial edible landscapes instead of lawns and ornamental landscapes, we solve all of the world's major problems. Mass adoption of this logic changes the world. And we can get deep into that if you'd like.
Oh, I like to go deep. Yes, very much so.
Good.
But let's start, I'm sure, with a question you get asked all the time, but what even pulled you in this direction?
Having my first 2 of 4 daughters. It was 2007 when I learned what was going on in the world to some degree. It's like peeling back layers of the onion. Sometimes you get tears with that. I learned what was going on. I learned permaculture, which stands for permanent culture. Originally, it was around permanent agriculture, but permanent culture is the holistic way to look at permaculture. And then I also had my first 2 daughters. And I have 4 girls now. And I went through a period of concern, of scarcity, of worry, of holy cow, how are we going to reverse this course, this direction that humanity's going, which is pure destruction. It's destroying everything on our planet, systemic ecological collapse, systemic cultural collapse, all the collapses at the same time, which we are experiencing now. But there is a solution, and that's what I've been focused on now for about 16 years.
All right, that's very cool. Yeah, I'm in Vermont, and we just had catastrophic flooding last month in downtown Montpelier. Primarily was like the worst hit, as well as my wellness center that was there just got wiped out.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, the imbalance in the natural world is evident everywhere.
Imbalance is a great word. When we use the permaculture techniques, number one, if all we did were take all the poisons out of our system, logically, and I'm talking not, I'm talking like, don't spray any glyphosate on our lawns. Don't spray any chemicals in the sky to refract the sunlight. Don't put chemicals in the water, right? When we simply take out these systems and use natural systems in place of for lab patented chemicals, then nature rebounds and balance is restored. Planting trees, the trees are air filters and they're water filters. A lot of people don't know that a big oak tree puts over 100 gallons of water in the atmosphere every single day. It takes the water through its root structure from the ground and transpires that water into the atmosphere. And it's clean water at that point. The tree becomes the filter. And that happens at scale throughout the whole natural system.
Yeah, it's like if you leave it alone, it all works really well.
Yeah, exactly.
So why do you think we've gotten so far away from this way of living?
So that's a very profound and a very needed question. And it's a needed question to listen to the answer and to ask, is this possible? Is this true? And because for me, it took me a long time to get through my thick skull that there are entities on this planet that are intentionally causing harm. And there are many layers of this, right? And some layers are pure speculation on my part. Other layers are obvious, right? We understand that a lot of corporations are putting poisons into our world. Monsanto has been sued for the use of glyphosate, billions of dollars. And in exchange, they'll say, yeah, we will pay this class action lawsuit as long as we can keep the poisons on the shelves. Like, how is that allowed by any governmente to be practiced? It's completely insane. So it's up to us, by the way, and this is the key to it. Govern means to manage, control, or steer, and mente means mind. The governmente is controlled by the corporations. We live in a whole corporatocracy, a fascist world that is not controlled by ethical people. And everybody kind of knows that, but yet we slough it off and we say, of course the politicians are going to steal money. That's just what they do. Well, I say to that, no, that's not acceptable, because when those people get together and they organize and strategize to carry out agendas that are destructive on every layer of our world, it's so obvious that it's up to us again to stand up and say no. And how do we say no? We don't want to go to war. We don't want to have a civil war or world war. We say no by taking our energy away from the destructive system. We become producers in a beautiful, serving, and loving way. And we take the poisons out and we create our own paradises at our own parks, our own yards, our own schools, the prisons. When we do these things, and we'll get real strategic and tactical about this on your show today, then it goes exponential.
Okay. It's a complex issue, right? And I guess we're all complicit in it. And I wonder if it just seems like this really daunting, overwhelming thing, like that David and Goliath kind of dynamic, where most of us feel powerless to the powers that be to be able to do something about it. But it sounds like what you're suggesting is that by growing your own food, that's a huge step in the right direction. It's
a huge step. And so we're going to have a lot of fun, because we are going to share the strategy and the tactics that we are employing that are going global right now around the world, that are inspiring and empowering people to plant seeds and to take those first steps. Because when we achieve mass adoption, in fact, I've been asking versions of this question now for 16 years. How do we catalyze a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption of taking the poisons out of our lives and growing perennial edible landscapes instead of lawns? There are 44 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. When we convert half of that lawn to regenerative perennial edible landscapes, we solve deforestation and mass extinction, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. We end world hunger, we create peace on earth, and we end tyranny. Now, that's a big statement, and I want debate. I invite debate. Say, you're crazy, Jim. There's no way that's possible. Well, what would happen if the biggest influencers that everybody knows, everybody write down the top most influential people you know in the world, what would happen if those people came together, the ethical ones, the ones that aren't bought and paid for? What would happen if they came together and shared how to do this? What would happen if a presidential candidate, for one, like let's take the top 5 candidates on both sides of this, wherever you want, right? What would happen if they said, we are going to reduce crime by 50% in the next 4 years? That's a big claim, is it not?
Yeah, that's a big claim.
Okay, so what would happen if they made a claim and then they said, here's how we're going to do it? All of the prisons are going to have permaculture education programs, and the prisoners, the inmates, are going to grow their own food. First of all, would they want to? Yes, this has been done before. As a result of the inmates using their time, and they have a lot of time, to go out and to grow their own food, as a result of that, the recidivism rates would drop by more than 60-70%. And it's been proven. So if that's been proven, which would literally end the majority of crime, then why isn't it done? Because we're not demanding that it be done by demonstrating it. So, by the way, we're putting a food forest at a local prison here. So with the approval of the warden and the head guy here in Florida, and then that's going to be the catalyst for 67 more prisons in Florida to do the same thing. And that's going to be the catalyst for every prison. We just ended the majority of crime. And when this gets organized from a government official at the highest level and organized from the people, we just ended crime.
Okay. All right. Going from growing food at the prison to reducing crime, how do you make that leap?
Okay, it's not a leap. It's actually been done. It's been proven. There was, anybody could type in Google, gardening programs for prison reform or for inmates, and look at the studies. There are multiple studies that show that the inmates become much healthier when they're eating poison-free food. The amount of taxpayer dollars saved because the inmates are growing food instead of having us pay for it, and the connection with the soil. So one study had the recidivism rate go from 60% to under 10%. Another study was close to 40% to under 10%. So it's been done with a 3-year program. And this is a pilot program. Now, when we combine our resources and we start teaching the inmates a trade, the trade being permaculture, design and installation, it's the biggest opportunity in the history of the world right now.
It makes sense. I just wanted to have you spell it out. If somebody's listening and they're like, okay, they plant tomatoes and then they don't want to commit crimes. Is that what?
It is.
But
there's a connection that happens. And that's one of the elements. So we look at it in the permaculture world, there's elements in our society. And so another element is the school system. Imagine some candidates for president getting together and saying, we are going to reduce childhood diabetes, and we're going to change the trends of disease and suicide and drug use and all of these things. How? By starting to teach permaculture and using the school grounds logically to create perennial edible landscapes. And the students are going to learn to grow all of their own food. When we do that from the people up, or should I say the people down and the politicians up, right? I want to switch that around. Then every school becomes a nursery. Every prison becomes a nursery. Every city park becomes a permaculture paradise.
Right. The part that I'm a little stuck on is, I don't know if you use the phrase ethical influencers.
Yeah.
And then you followed it up by talking about politicians. And you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little
Jaded.
Yeah, jaded's a good word. As far as you said, finding people who aren't bought. And
Yes.
isn't that the nature of being an influencer, right? Is that they're typically end up being bought in some way.
Well, yeah, I think that in many cases it is the nature of it, especially when we look on the mainstream TV. They are completely political shills for you know what for. So, but that's the point. When we call them out in this type of way, and we make it abundantly clear that this is in their best interest, because there's two reasons not to take out the poisons and grow perennial edible landscapes. And I want to step back and talk about the difference between an annual garden, a monoculture garden, which is an annual garden at scale, which is incredibly destructive. So an annual raised bed, that's awesome. We should all have annual raised beds. A monoculture crop is completely destructive, but a perennial edible landscape, at Galt Signing, we have 230 different types of food growing in our space. I can walk outside anytime because I'm in Florida. In Minnesota, my buddy can walk out six months of the year and have radical amounts of food. In Florida, that's 12 months of the year. So I can walk outside and within 10 minutes, I can have a huge basket of food with no maintenance required. No pesticides, no poisons, no weed killers, none of that stuff. It's simply perennial plants that literally produce more every single year they're alive.
It sounds so logical and beautiful. And why aren't we all doing it? Right? Most of us are gardeners, right? If we have property, well, I should say a lot of us in Vermont, we have gardens, but you're saying that there's an easier, actually healthier way to do it for the soil and
Yes.
for the natural world through permaculture.
Yes.
And I've heard about permaculture here and there and the idea of it, and I don't understand why it's not catching on. Do you have any theories?
I have a lot of theories that are backed up. I've been on about 400 podcasts in the last 2 years and a few months. And one of them was The Inspired with Jean Nolan. It's called Inspired. It's a great, great show. Amazing people, Jean and Christine. And I was on their show, and I was on several shows. And after a couple shows, they did a kind of a follow-up research, and they said, Jim, we've had David Icke on. We've had all of these very well-known kind of conspiracy theorists or people. You are the most censored message that we've ever put out. This is the solution. So Victor Hugo said there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. The Garden of Eden, enlightenment. And I'm not talking about a religious perspective with fear and scarcity and all that. I'm talking about just a place of radical abundance is the idea whose time has come. It's stronger than all of the armies of the world. Enlightenment is the opposite of governmente. Right? When governmente means mind control, literally. Enlightenment means a mind free of mind control. When we rise up into this state of presence and then we simply use our energy wisely, then no governments can touch us.
You're saying it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to start growing.
Permaculture is perennial edible landscapes. And it can be, so maintenance is, there's literally no maintenance if you don't want to be. If you want it to be fancy, if you want to trim and have square bushes, you can, right? Ours, it's more of a jungle of food. But other people in HOAs, they need it to be kind of manicured. Great. It's the same amount of maintenance as an ornamental landscape. The difference is profound. The difference is a living system instead of a dead system. The difference is food instead of not food.
If it's so easy, then why aren't we doing it?
Oh,
And
yeah.
how does one go about doing it or making that transition?
Yes. So permaculture itself is literally as complex as nature. It's infinitely complex. The design principles and the ethics are really simple, right? The core ethics are earth care, people care, and reinvesting the surplus in a logical way that's beneficial to everybody. And then the design principles, there's 12 principles of permaculture. Basically, principles like stacking functions. So instead of just having a roof over your head, you put gutters on the side of the roof and you put them down to a rain barrel, or you put them down to a pond. And now you're not only using roof to be the roof of your house, right? But you're also now using it to catch and store water in your landscape. Now you could be using your roof for solar. Some people build in houses where they use their roofs to grow food. I don't, because it's not as natural, but that's called stacking functions. A fence is a trellis. Every fence in the world should have some grapevines or passion fruit vines or kiwis or all these different kinds of vining plants. And now you've got a green living fence that produces food for generations to come. Right. So that's permaculture. It's finding the elements and stacking the functionality of them and working the edges and integrating and taking feedback, observing and interacting. Right. It's about letting nature actually be our guides, and then we become the stewards of the natural system.
So what about it's only perennials? You can't do annuals. Like
you can.
Okay.
Absolutely. You can. They're just, annuals are a tiny bit more work. Like you could plant the seed. You might have to, some people want to go out and weed them and different things. I'm a fan of perennials because they're just no work. But annuals are great too, by the way.
I think that's what most of us think of when we're thinking about a traditional garden is tomatoes and corn and squash and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about fruits. And
peaches, plums, and pears, and apples, and raspberries, and blueberries, and blackberries, and avocados, and bananas, and plantains, and quadradas, and yucca, and it's just, there's thousands. In fact, there's lists now of over 100,000 perennial edible plants that this databases have come together, and each zone has its plants that thrive in that zone. So where I'm from in Minnesota, my buddy's got 300 different types of perennial plants. He's got a thriving food forest that's 5 years old. Our food forest is only about 1.5 years old. It's thriving as well, right? It's just different plants.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So you'd have to find out what grows in your region because we can't do avocados here in Vermont.
Right. Or bananas or moringa.
Yeah. But we do have I guess, a cold, hardy version of kiwi.
Yeah. Oh, you could have 8 or 9 different species of kiwi there.
One of the things that I think about, and this is something that I can tend to get up on a soapbox about, is just everything you're talking about, how it reflects our relationship with the natural world. Or maybe I should actually rephrase that and say that the lack of relationship we have with the natural world. And really what you're doing, it sounds like, is you're inviting us to be back in relationship with the natural world, which is really, I think it makes no sense to not have that relationship, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so our question, this evolving question about how do we catalyze this shift in awareness, right? Because choice, people use the word choice all the time, but without awareness, there is no choice. So the first thing that we like to do is plant those seeds of awareness by demonstrating this. So we invite anybody who wants to come to Galt's Landing in Central Florida after John Galt from Atlas Shrugged and come and stay with us in our Airbnbs. Come and walk the food forest. We have 100% satisfaction, like 100% of people who leave Galt's Landing leave inspired. And we have people that have tears and are sobbing with joy every day. Like almost every single day, people are seeing a path to freedom, to abundance, to a world of incredible abundance for our grandkids and beyond. So demonstrating these systems, whether it be in your own backyard on 100 square feet, right? On 100 square feet, you can have 3 primary food producing trees. You can have roots and tubers, sweet potatoes. You can have an herbaceous layer with mushrooms. You can have some smaller shrubs and taller shrubs and understory trees and raspberries and blueberries and blackberries. And then you can even have vines growing up the trees. So in one little area, you can produce an amazing amount of food when you stack the layers using permaculture.
What about in metropolitan areas? Like somebody who's living in a high rise in an apartment.
Yeah, it's you can still do it. The cannabis industry has shown us that we can turn a closet into a grow room, but it's not ideal. It still needs inputs. You need to go out somewhere and you need to grab soil. It's not ideal, but it can be done. You can take a 5-gallon bucket in a closet with some reflective tape and some LED lights, and you can grow your own potatoes. You can literally turn dirt into potatoes. How magical is that? Right? And a lot of people we know are doing that.
Yeah, because I assume not everybody listening has access to a yard.
But most people have access to a friend or relative or family member that has a yard. And so if you called up 5 of your friends, family members, your closest people and said, hey, how about I come over to your place and I will plant a bunch of food, perennial, permaculture style or annuals, right? Raised beds are great right now. Raised beds solve the short-term food supply issues that are happening. The food supply chain, this is what I've been studying. It's done. It's actually been destroyed a long time ago. We are now eating foods grown with poisons. Dr. Jane Goodall said, we shall look back on this dark era of agriculture and shake our heads. How could we have ever thought it was a good idea to grow our food with poisons? So anyway, so you go to your friends and you can say, I'll grow it as long as we can split the yield. And most people that have any kind of wits about them say, that sounds good to me.
No, I don't want free food. No.
Right?
Yeah, that you're going to grow. Have you done any work around parks, like city or county land that could be used potentially?
We want to, the cities, the people in these organizations are so far, and not going to work, to inspire this change, have been the hardest people to crack through their programming. Schools, we did a really awesome food forest at a local school. Like I mentioned, we're going into the prison system. That's already approved. In fact, anybody listening who wants to participate in that, we're raising $5,000, and we're going to put $5,000 and we're going to use our networks. We're going to put like a $15,000 food system for $5,000 because everybody wants to participate with labor and materials. So, and then we're going to put cameras on it so we can show the inmates in the ground growing their own food. And we're talking about what that will mean for them as individuals and for the society at large. So to answer your question about the parks, we're getting there, but we're not there yet because of bureaucracy.
Really? Okay. Well, that's surprising. Yeah.
And
so,
you know what? As I said that, I apologize for interrupting, but as I said that, I want to just take a step back into my own awareness. That's kind of BS. I don't want to disempower myself by blaming it on BR. I'm going to take full power on this. We haven't got there yet because we have failed up to this point to figure out the way in. Right. So if anybody listening has a way in with some logical thinkers, let's get into the parks. Let's get into the opportunity zones. Let's get into public land and let's come together and do this. We're here to support it.
Nice reframe. But the thing that you're referencing, though, with, I guess, how you can be jaded too,
yeah,
any of us can be, is the money part probably. And I mean, the bigger money part, like the corporate influences and how that ties in with politicians and decision makers, that I guess it makes you feel as though you don't have a voice always.
Yeah, for sure. And so then how do we get that voice? Well, we shine a light on the truth of the matter. We bring people in, we show what's possible, including the politicians, including the people who are the heads of HOAs, right? Some of these are some of my favorite people to inspire because it's a challenge. And we started
Oh, that's what
inspiring.
I've heard. Yes.
And then all of a sudden, when people see it, like I've literally been with people where all of a sudden they saw it. All of a sudden they felt inspired. And it's just like a cascade of a waterfall. And it's so emotional and so energizing. It's a beautiful thing to witness.
I bet it is. Yeah. I mean, what a cool thing, especially to know that you were a part of that to help make that happen. It's got to feel very rewarding.
It does.
That's one of the things I'm curious about just with you personally. Well, first of all, what did you do before you started going down the
Yeah.
permaculture road?
Okay, a little bit of a backstory, life story. I know that having a vision, an inspiring vision, is of utmost value. So when I was 19, my college wrestling coach, our coach, told everybody in the room, you've got to write your goals. And if you don't write your goals, you can't come to practice on Monday. It was a Friday. And so I was like, oh, it was a pen and paper were involved. And I did not like school at all. I daydreamed my way through all of school. And yeah, I would have been definitely labeled ADD and they would have tried to drug me. So Sunday night, I started asking the questions on the goal sheets that the coach had provided. And as I was asking these questions, something in my mind, something in my aura, my spirit was changing. I was starting to see myself in the future. And for that, it was 4 years because it was a college, and I was starting to imagine myself 4 years from then as a national champion and a 4-time All-American wrestler. Now, the thing was, the 2 years previous, I had gotten whooped. I was horrible. I was lost. I didn't know which way I was going to go. So it was the act of sitting down and visualizing myself in the future and feeling my way into that catalyzed a shift for me. And thanks to that shift, I was a 4-time All-American and national champ, inducted in the Hall of Fame. And it just taught me a big lesson. I then got really inspired by the great books, right? The Zig Ziglars and Jim Rohn's and Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Winning. It's an old one. It's so good. And Tony Robbins and all of the other personal coaches out there at the time. And I went down deep. And one of my favorite, there's a lot of favorites, but one of my favorite concepts is Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. Yeah, it's a classic. And after Napoleon Hill was commissioned to study the most successful manifestors in the history of the world, he deducted whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. So then I started playing with that. And I moved to Hawaii. Then I was living in Africa with the Maasai and all over the place on a kind of a world backpacking tour. Pretty much broke, but having a fun time. And I wrote my goals again. And I wrote that I wanted to be retired in 3 years with $3 million. I had bartending experience and I had a teaching degree.
Nice.
And,
go ahead, please. I can't wait to hear this. All right.
And I got home and I just happened to be sharing a 3-bedroom place with two of my friends, Pete and Rob, and they were both engineers who just graduating. They just got jobs as engineers and they were feeling really good. And I had just written my goals and I just started in the mortgage business. Right? And I told them my goals and we were having a couple of beers on a Friday night and they started laughing at me and Pete got angry at me. He literally got mad at me when I was sharing with him my goals about what I was going to achieve. And everybody has experienced this. When we talk about what we want to somebody in our family or friends that's close to us, that doesn't believe we can have it, they don't do it on purpose. It's just their belief system. It's their BS.
Crushing though, yeah.
It can be if we allow it to be. But when we recognize that our belief systems have nothing to do with them, right? So anyway, they were laughing and I smiled because I'd already had this happen to me several times. Anyway, 3.5 years later, my company did $1.3 billion in revenue and I bought a boat and lived on the ocean for a year.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah, right?
All right. I mean, you make it sound easy, but why is it that not all of us then who maybe write our goals down and really can see ourselves doing it, why it doesn't happen?
So while I was doing this, I turned off the radio and I listened to Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now for maybe 6 or 7 years. I don't know how many thousands of hours. And then not just that, but everything else I could find related to consciousness and presence and awareness. And it's way easier to be conscious. A lot of people will take McDonald's, for example, and they'll say it's really hard to eat healthy. And my answer to that is it's a lot harder not to.
Yeah.
and people go, oh, you're kind of right. But it's a habit. So to become aware of our habits, where our habits are creating dis-ease and discontent in our lives, once we start this process, it's a cycle. And a lot of people are on this trend of scarcity and worry about everything going on in the world, and they're contracting. You know, fear is the only thing to fear, and don't fear it because that won't work. It is the contraction of everything manifesting, everything good. It's the contraction of spirit and awareness and energy, right? So the foundation of freedom is faith and courage. When we recognize that this is a temporary experience and that we are in this circumstance, and there's many different perspectives on this. My personal perspective, which I have fun with, is this is a divine game of our own creation. And what's the win of the game? It's to wake up from government day and to create the Garden of Eden. That's my thing.
It sounds like you have somehow managed to keep fear very small or at bay in your existence, which is actually kind of rare. I mean, as a psychotherapist, the people who come chat with me, that's the biggest thing that seems to get in any of our way is the fear. And when you talk about like your friend laughing at you or scoffing at your dream, that's probably more a projection of their own fear. It has nothing to do with you or your dream. But we don't always remember that. When we're in the midst of that kind of conversation, we just experience their discouragement and then it just crushes you. It can. Your programming must be such that it's like you're catching yourself constantly.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I went and got a master's in NLP to find ways to ask new questions, like the solution
to start a cult.
A culture, right? A culture of abundance.
Nice.
See, it's a habit for me now. I also love to share my failures because that's what a lot of people relate to. And I have had epic failures. I had $20 million in about 2007. And I had been spending like I was a new rich guy, right? To me, that's what I considered myself. Holy cow, I'm rich for the rest of my life. My kids, my grandkids are all right. I went down. Once I learned what was going on in the world, I learned the problem. I learned permaculture, and I had my first 2 daughters. It was actually my first 2 daughters that were the catalyst for the scarcity because I was fearful of the world that they were going to inherit. I was fearful that I wasn't going to be able to, or we weren't going to be able to figure out and turn this around. I invested every bit of my life savings, $20 million. I had a 7,000 square foot house, a Jaguar, a motorcycle, all this stupid shit, right? Just because that's where I was. That's where my consciousness was at the time. It was in this material world. And I invested every bit of it. I went down to 27 months ago. I had negative $80,000. My business was shut down, not by COVID, but by the governmente, right? COVID was the excuse. The governmente is the one that told us at the mall that we're basically shut down. The governmente is the one who basically made all these rules, right? I don't believe in rulers. I don't believe in authority. I don't believe in anybody else being the author of my story.
So I just lost you. I'm sorry. What business got closed?
So about a lot of backstory there, but I started a business at a mall after investing in eco villages in Costa Rica and Nicaragua and these different businesses. All of them failed. I had massive amounts of failed businesses.
Okay. All right.
Yes. In one case, the government of Costa Rica came in, the guys from Satena came in, and they extorted us. They said, if you give us $20,000 under the table, we won't shut you down. We took them to court and we won, but the damage was done. A court-appointed actuary says that we are owed $28 million. I'm not holding my breath. So there was a series of divine synchronicities and events. And because I was in scarcity, these divine synchronicities and events led me to more scarcity. It's like this weird, amazing rock bottom, dark end of the soul wake up thing where until we finally let go of that BS, the belief systems brought on by bad science, and it's all bullshit, right? When we finally let go of all that BS and step into who we truly are. So 27 months ago, my business had been shut down and I was dead broke. I was crying. I was going for a walk. I was listening to some of my teachers online. And I decided, based on something one of them said, to let go of it all and just step into faith. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. I've never truly tried it. I've never truly gone for it. Not tried, but done it. And I remember the step I took. I remember everything lit up for me. And from that moment forward, it's been a miracle ride.
I'm really glad you shared that part of your story because, I mean, it's super powerful, right? Because each one of us has these experiences. If we're lucky, it's only one time where you have this sort of death and rebirth kind of experience where everything gets wiped away, all your dreams, whatever. But then it puts you in a place, it forces you at that point. Because when everything's going great, there's nothing pushing back against you, and you kind of have this illusion that it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Right. And when you lose it all, that's when the real growth can happen. And that was a beautiful example of that you shared. So I appreciate that. And I think it's good for people to hear that you can come back from something as devastating as what you've gone through and not only be successful, but also be transformed as a result of it. So it sounds like your whole perspective has enriched how you see yourself and the world, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Infinitely. I shifted from the energy below that of faith and courage, which is the foundation of a free mind. And I was living in maybe a little bit of pride, which not the pride of, hey, I did something cool, but the pride that was more based in fear and humiliation and shame and arrogance, right? Because I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed that this happened. How could this be happening to me? Because right before that, I felt really cool. Right. And then I started recognizing that the ego is the illusion, right? It's all this junk, all this stuff in my head, this cultural conditioning, these programs, right? Though that word is not an accident. The word governmente is not an accident. The entity Black Rock is not only the name, it's the intention of the entity, right? By their deeds, you shall know them. Look at what they invest in. They suck money like a parasite out of society.
BlackRock?
BlackRock, yeah, it's the entity that controls the world. It's run by a computer named Aladdin.
Oh, okay. So I'm not familiar with this.
Oh yeah, you can Google it. If you look up what is the computer named Aladdin, that basically found a way to bet at the right time in the right way against the people in the marketplace. And it bets better than them because it's been programmed to do so. And it sucks the money out, not by providing value there's no value. It's simply a betting machine that simply sucks the energy out of society. So anyway, just a side note, if that entity called Aladdin invests in life, or when that entity invests in life instead of death, boom, the world has changed.
Okay. So one of the really important things I also want to focus in on that you talked about was the faith piece. You don't know, there's no guarantees that anything's going to happen, right? The way you want it to. So you kind of walk in with your fingers crossed and like maybe wincing, like, man, I sure hope this works out because I'm in a bad place.
Yeah.
But then I'm wondering though, if you jumped from faith into trust.
I think it's the same thing. For me, those resonate as the same thing. Having faith, it seems to be even higher than trust for me in my energy field, because everybody's got a different energetic word.
Right. Okay.
So Tesla described it well. He said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. But there's a word that was he either missed a word or the word was changed. And that's what the thought police do, right? So don't think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Feel it. Take a deep breath, walk outside with nature, feel the energy that's everywhere. There's energy, infinite energy. There's free energy systems everywhere, right? And when we can connect with that, and it's only through presence that we can connect with that energy. When we become present and we start connecting with that energy again, then it's a knowing that I'm more than this, right? This is fun. Somebody told me about a year and a half ago, said, Jim, do you know what your name means? I'm like, no, I don't. They said, well, James, my name is James Patrick Gale. James means to defeat, overthrow, or supplant. Patrick means noble, and Gale means strong wind. So you are here. And I was like, oh my gosh, how could that be a coincidence? Because that's just that's the character that I'm playing.
Kind of perfect. So let me switch gears back to permaculture and what your organization, Food Forest Abundance, is doing to help folks.
Yeah. So we launched with the help of Dale Bigtree about, it was Earth Day 2021. And we are now helping people in 54 countries and 50 US states by designing and installing, and they're two different functions, right? Designing a permaculture edible landscape. The first step in freedom and abundance is to design our land to be the most productive that it can possibly be. And the permaculture designers that are in our network are fantastic. They make their living by helping people design these abundance systems in their landscapes. Then a lot of people it's a very comprehensive design. It's like a blueprint. Then a lot of people take that blueprint and they either DIY it, or then they get a group to install it. So we have a design team and an installation team, and we're all over the world helping people do this.
Beautiful. Also, you're going to be on the TV?
Yeah, we just got filmed through the Modern Homestead movement. We're going to be on Discovery Channel. I think the first one's coming out in 60 days. We've got movies, we've got TV shows. People are writing songs and poems, and one person's doing a screenplay about the idea whose time has come. And we're catalyzing the influencers to come together. And they are. Like, it's amazing what's happening. There's generals and colonels and green berets and doctors and medical professionals that are into freedom and into the awareness of what's going on. All these different folks from different cultures and professions are coming together to share this simple message. And over the next 15 months, we're going to change the world.
All right. Well, I guess when you say shit like that, it actually happens. So I'll stay tuned and and wait for your world changing to kick in, and hopefully do some on my own.
Awesome.
in my own way. Hopefully all of us are working towards that in some way, even if it's just healing yourself, right?
Yes.
That can be pretty world changing. Yeah.
Yes, your heart and your mind. That's where we start.
Yeah, because maybe the outside world is just a reflection of the inside world. And we got 8 billion people on the planet. And if all of us are a bit fucked up on the inside, then that's what we're seeing in the world around us, huh?
100%. And there's a shift right now going on where the people that are stepping into these incredibly logical and beneficial kind of ways, they're experiencing massive abundance. And a lot of people are watching the mainstream TV and they're feeling crappy and they're eating poisons and stuff. So what we want to do is help them create the awareness that there's a better choice. And then boom.
Boom it is. All right. How do folks learn more about you and your work?
So anybody who wants to start learning the process, our design team is standing by. We do a 30-minute free strategy session, no credit cards, nothing. We have no patents. We have no NDAs. We have no non-competes. Everything we do is open source. So you can go on our website. You can share anything you want, right? Everything is 100%. So if you want to talk with one of our professional designers, then the designer will chat with you for 30 minutes. It's a very valuable time. Answer anything you want. If you then want to go on your own and go through social media and do it yourself, great. If you want to speed up time, our design team and our install team are standing by to help people design and install. And then if you want to be part of the mission, become an abundance ambassador, if you want to become a designer or installer, or the best of all is the Freedom Farm Academy modern homestead model, where you create your whole home, your whole homestead to be 100% off grid. Like our place, we produce all of the food, all of the water, all of the energy we need to be completely self-reliant. And then we turn that into an education and demonstration center, inviting our community in. Because when everybody in our community eats, then we have true food security.
I love it. Jim, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you, Wendy. It's been a pleasure.
I told you he was enthusiastic. Do you like the idea of turning your yard or outdoor space into an edible forest? Well, check out foodforestabundance.com to learn more and to schedule your free consultation. Well, thank you so much for listening. While I'm working towards reopening Lucid Path Wellness, I'm going to do my best to get episodes out every several weeks as I've done in the past. Fingers crossed I can pull it off. Okay, I hope your day is a really good one. Until next time.